Okay, guys. So just before starting this presentation, I just wanted to start, with this kind of short disclaimer, just to let you know that I don't have, the pretension, to replace whatever framework you may use. This presentation is really based on my personal observations and experiences. The second disclaimer is that your creative process may differ from mine, and that's perfectly fine. And I would be very happy, to have also your inputs and insight on this. And the third one is, sorry, my creative process is not intended to replace any other existing frameworks you find useful, but instead complement them so that you can unleash your creativity to the fullest when it comes to creating new things. Okay, guys, just before we start, I have just one simple question. Who did this test? And who wants to share the result with the crowd? No judgment, it's just, to start, the discussion. So last time for me, I got the innovator. So I know that I think Chunwei had the visionary or something. Maybe you want to share?
Yeah. The screen, I think I did a screenshot. But yeah, it was visionary.
Not specifically share but just, I mean.
Hold on, let me find it first.
I have it in front of me actually, because I just did it and I got the visionary as well.
Nice.
And it says creative strength. It's full of big ideas, ability to seek potential and possibility everywhere.
Nice, cool. Did it reflect also your creative personality as well, or not that much? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe full of big ideas, not good at executing.
Awesome. Okay, guys. So we are going to talk about what's behind creativity and how you can basically become creative. I see, some other people joining the call now, so it's okay. I mean, I'm just starting, so you haven't missed nothing critical. So guys, just please, if you don't mind turning on your camera, as I would like this presentation to be more in the form of a discussion, kind of exchange with you. I will ask you some questions along the presentation, and I want it as interactive as possible. If you don't want to turn your camera, it's fine. If you can just, kind of bounce, sometimes on my questions, it will be awesome. So today I will address these following points. So we'll take a look at what creativity is about and how it is defined, to just sort of installing the basics of this presentation. Then after this, I'll explain to you what's my daily journey when it comes to creativity and what kind of problems we can encounter when it comes to creating something, basically. What kind of tool or framework you can use on a daily basis as well. And finally, I'll show you through two projects how I had to develop my creativity and how we can concretely use the canvas I developed. So what is creativity? So I would like to show you here two definitions I particularly like, as they cover, from my perspective, the full spectrum of what creativity is about. So the first one, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, creativity is the ability to produce original and unusual ideas or to make something new or imaginative. So this one, to me, looks a bit blurred, right? The question here I have for you is actually, how would you guys define what is original or unusual? Knowing that, I would say, in a constantly evolving environment and society, I think to give, a proper definition of these terms is actually a tough task. So let's take a look at the second definition, which is by Robert E. Franken. He said that creativity, is the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, alternatives, or possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertaining ourselves with others. So this one is more accurate and down to earth, okay? So why I like these two definitions is because one is more aspirational, more blurred. We don't really define it accurately, whereas the other one is more tangible, more concrete. And I do believe, actually, that creativity is a smart mix of these two things. Sometimes we have random ideas from nowhere, which can be amazing and change people's life or amaze them. And sometimes we can generate these ideas by using some techniques like the design thinking, for example. And we'll talk about it along this presentation. So I won't talk too much about the definition, but more of how creativity can be applied. And of course, through this presentation, I'll talk about what I do on a daily basis at work and in my personal life by designing a lot of stuff. But maybe you've been creative also at some point in your life. Perhaps you discovered an answer to a difficult problem, or maybe you found a new way to interpret a data set, or to write a new code, or maybe you found a new way to interview your users when you are doing your user research, or to animate an agile training with your clients. What I want to tell you here is no matter your expertise or experience is about, everyone can be creative at some point. And it begs now a question, which is, where does it all come from? So as a designer and a video specialist in my current job, my daily task entails creating and designing assets and marketing collaterals. So they can be in a form of videos, posters, animations, and even 3D models sometimes. And of course, this is a day-to-day challenge that I need to succeed in, as I'm required to produce new things with new ideas, avoiding as much as possible to reuse anything that I created previously. So yeah, you can imagine, guys, I mean, designing stuff takes time and requires also a mental and intellectual effort at all time. But the main point is actually to question everything we are doing when it comes to designing or creating something. So I'm talking about design now because it's my area of my working area, but of course it can apply also for you if you are a salesperson or if you are a developer or whatever. You have to question things like, if I'm talking about design, I will be like, why am I using this color, or why this shape, why this tech stack, for example, or why this agile way of working for this client. And everything has a reason, and it's not a random choice. And it's by asking all these questions that you can achieve a very solid and consistent deliverable that doesn't need to be explained. And this is what we want ultimately, right? We want something to be understood, by the people we are talking to, right? So once I said that, here's my current problem. How can I generate new ideas that can be translated into appealing graphics every day? Here I'm talking about design because I'm a designer, as I said, but I would like to challenge you guys, and ask you also, what are your current problems, in your day-to-day job? Maybe for agile people, it would be the resistance of the client who are not willing to change, or for developers, the complexity of the code you need to write in a short amount of time. So maybe if someone wants to share a little bit more on what the pain points you can encounter at work. So maybe you can take 30 seconds, 1 minute to discuss about this. Who wants to start? No worries, guys. It's a safe space. There's no judgment. We are just talking between us.
I can go. I think for me, probably at the moment, the biggest challenge, I'm not sure if it's related to creativity. It's a lot more about managing stakeholder expectations, right, and communicating with them. Yeah, at the moment, I can't link this so much to creativity. Maybe it's not related so much to a new idea, but it's more, how you communicate with them. Yeah.
It doesn't need to be related or linked, to creativity, but it's more on how you can tackle this problem later on. And, yeah, okay. Thank you for sharing, Chunui. Anyone else who wants to share? Nobody's interested. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. So I would like, however, to
maybe I share an example.
Sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Yeah. For example, as part of the design, like solution design or architectural kind of design, we try to understand the requirements and the basically the components and the systems Every time, though you know how to design things, but it's always in the beginning, it's a challenge. Like, so when you have a complex architecture, you always try to be a little creative. How can I, bring all these things into one single canvas? And we always try to struggle. If somebody looks at it, they should be able to easily digest this, right? Otherwise, I can simply just create, random diagram. Maybe the others might not pursue. So that's an opportunity for most of us, to really think, creatively. Okay, what color schemes I can use? Should I use arrows or should I use blur lines? When you have more information to depict and you have less symbols to, to showcase, then you try to think more creative there. That's one of the examples that came into my mind when you asked, actually.
Thanks, Sam, for sharing. Very interesting, and yeah, I think that's it's a common problem for a lot of developers, I guess. But thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So as I was saying before, so I would like, however, address one topic here. So when we talk about creativity, we also need to talk about talent. So why is that? Because if you look at some examples, talent and creativity are not all the time linked to one another. They can be linked, but first, it's not always the case. And second, talent is not always required to be creative. By just being organized and following some easy principles, you can become creative without being talented. Talent, I would say, is a capacity. It's a skill, it's a boost or an accelerator for creativity. But it's also a differentiator which allows people to judge the level of creativity of someone. But of course, we are not all equal when it comes to talent. Some people are more talented than others, and that may give them an advantage over others who don't share the same aptitude. And some of the most influential creators of our time were very talented individuals. That's a fact. But let's not forget also the amount of time they have had to put into it. And personally, I believe that talent can be nourished, it can be taught, which in turn makes us more creative as a byproduct of working hard and being curious. So talent is useful, as I explained just before, but it's not everything. It doesn't do everything. Talent can be a good boost to your creativity and generate new ideas. So now, guys, I would like to ask you one question. Can you guys tell me who are these two people? Probably one of you know at least one of them. I hope so.
Right one looks like Mozart or someone, I think.
Who?
Yeah,
Sorry?
the right side one should be Mozart.
Mozart, right?
Almost Mozart, almost same period.
Or Beethoven.
Beethoven. Okay.
Beethoven. Okay.
Yeah, Beethoven.
So you're right. So the guy on the right is Beethoven, and the one on the left is less famous, I would say, and his name is actually Marcel Duchamp. So Marcel Duchamp was a French artist, and he created something which basically revolutionized the art and creation conception. And I'm gonna explain it to you. So I guess you're wondering why I put these two pictures on the slide. The first reason is that both of them created masterpieces that revolutionized the music history and the art history. So Beethoven was deaf and Duchamp was a kind of misunderstood artist, and yet they produced great masterpieces. So I don't know if you heard about it, but Beethoven was very inspired by the natural environment. He used to go for long walks in the suburbs of Vienna to breathe the fresh air of the countryside and see all the trees and the forest animals. And he even wrote a symphony, the number 6, which is called the Pastoral Symphony, and which is a node to nature. And each part of this symphony reflects his feeling of how he could musically represent a shepherd in a field or a storm in the middle of the afternoon. And during the composition, he used a variety of evocative musical techniques to give the listeners the same feeling of being surrounded in nature. Duchamp, on his side, has a very interesting story. He was a painter, artist, who had a certain notoriety at the time, so it was the early 20th century. But he wasn't as famous as Van Gogh or Picasso or this kind of artist. And his work wasn't as creative or innovative as some painters of this time. So I won't talk too much about his life, although it's very exciting, but I'm going to talk to you about what he did. So we are in Paris in 1914, sorry, 1 year before the start of the First World War, and Duchamp decides to participate in an art contest, a kind of art exhibition where artists are asked to introduce an art piece of their production. But Duchamp had a lot of humor, and he decided to make a joke actually for this contest. And yet he didn't know that at the time, this joke would completely and radically change the art world and the art perception. He decided to basically strictly follow the guidelines of the contest, to finally go in a shopping mall in Paris and to buy a bottle holder and sign it. And he basically created the first ready-made concept. So obviously at the time, nobody took his art piece seriously, and everyone was scandalized, by this initiative, of just taking a random object and claiming it as a piece of art. And actually, a few years later, in 1917, he started again by taking this time a urinal that he flipped on the side and proposed it to the New York Museum. And it was again a very, very big scandal. But today, we can clearly see that this concept of ready-made that he invented and that revolutionized the art conception is widely spread all over the world. You may remember this banana on a museum wall sold for $120,000 as a piece of art. So that's one of the examples. So I guess right now you understand where I'm trying to lead you. So where I'm leading you is inspiration. Inspiration is the key to develop your creativity. However, I would like now to give you, my own definition of what creativity is. And I think creativity can be defined as the action of finding inspiration from numerous sources and then turning this inspiration into ideas. This is what I explained just before with Beethoven, for example, who was going in the nature and taking inspiration from nature, or Duchamp. So creativity is the action of leveraging inspiration and turning it into ideas. And it can be applied to absolutely anything. It can be an event. It can be a coding problem you want to tackle. It can be the color of your house walls. That being said, taking inspiration from different sources doesn't mean that you copy what others do, which is the exact opposite of what creativity is about. Copying what others do actually kills creativity, and trains people to be lazy. And this is not what we want, right? So once I said that, would creativity, be a matter of inspiration? Well, for some colleagues or friends in the creative industry, often I hear them saying, I'm not creative enough, I don't have this gift of being creative. But honestly, what does it mean? Creativity or inspiration are not gifts. This is not something you were born with. If your name is Mozart or Da Vinci, then maybe I could say, okay, you have a gift because these guys were absolutely genuinely skilled and their work is just gigantic. Maybe you'll have, some ideas in the middle of the night to create something very particular and amazing, and that's great. But waiting for inspiration to come without doing anything rarely works, and I know what I'm talking about. So for those who don't know, I have a background of musician. I used to be a professional in France, and I've been writing a lot of pieces for piano since then. And I can assure you one thing, waiting to be hit by the genius rarely works. Sometimes you will have this kind of flash ideas or something you find amazing for a short instance, and I would say just go for it. Jump on this idea and do something with, because it doesn't happen that often. I mean, at least for me, but maybe you guys are more talented than I am, and I'm sure you are. But what I want to tell you is inspiration must be trained. So I would like to tell you also a quick story about my music work. As I said, I've been writing music for quite some time now, and a few years ago, in 2015, I started to write this piece for piano called The Perfume. And at the beginning of the writing process, I was pretty comfortable. I had an idea, nice melody that I liked, and I was I don't know, I felt very good at first. So I'm a bit old school, so I like to write my music directly on the paper, as you can see. Then after a few weeks of writing, I got stuck. I found that what I wrote at some point was not consistent and weird, and I didn't like the way it matched with the rest. So I'm talking especially about this part. So you can see I was very angry and furious against it. But so I erased everything, but once I did that, it didn't solve the problem. I didn't have any ideas to continue. So what I did was to wait. And I waited for quite some time because I waited for 3 years. So every month I was coming back on the music itself, trying to play some new things on the keyboard, but I couldn't find any good ideas. And for 3 years, I tried to write some things, and yet it didn't, I didn't like any of my ideas. And one day in 2018, I had that, what I called in the previous slide, a flash idea to continue. And I was practicing and trying to find ideas, and the rest of the music appeared to me. And in only 3-4 days, I completed the rest of the piece and wrote 5 pages of music. And since then, I never touched again the sheet music because I know that what I wrote is right actually from my perspective. So of course, this example is what you should avoid to do, meaning that waiting for ideas to come alone doesn't work. You need to practice and find inspiration from other sources. I should have done that at the time, listening to other piano pieces or composers or movie musics. And maybe this piece could have never been finished if I wouldn't have had this idea from nowhere. And as mentioned before, even Beethoven or Duchamp needed, to nurture their creativity with inspiration. And even famous architects like Le Corbusier or Jean Nouvel, or even designers like Charles Eames, needed to look for new and inventive ways to surprise people. And by doing so, they produced also great masterpieces. So now I have a question for you guys. Can inspiration be taught? So I think you have a part of the answer because I said a lot of things since the beginning of this presentation, but I would like to know what you guys are thinking about it. Maybe Chris wants to share something about inspiration.
Oh, yeah, sure. When it comes to inspiration, yeah, I left a message there. Is basically, I would say it can be taught through inspiration. So basically, all the people that I research on or the things that I look at are like my mentors. So I learned it from them and basically kind of steal their ideas. But my definition of steal, of course, is not like taking the same work and claim it as your own, but basically just take that inspiration and try to do something better or something at least that is of that kind of quality. So it's not really steal, because for me, I always think that nothing is much, there's not much originality when it comes to design. It's always about how you create, how you research, and how you upgrade and improve whatever that has been out there. Yeah, that's for me.
Okay, great. Thanks for your answer. Anyone else wants to share something?
I can share something too. Oh, sorry. Natasha, you want to go ahead? Okay, so I think I left a comment as well that when I was doing website design in the past, I think I'm bad at it, but the way I tried to improve was to kind of get ideas, but combining the right ideas and then adapting to what you need to use it for. I think that was kind of the way. And when I was doing PhD as well, I think there are different kinds of research students. There are those that are like Einstein who writes, a paper out of nowhere and then, amazes the whole world. But 99.9% of the PhD students basically study everything around them, and they are just kind of adding really like 1 or 2% of something new after you understood, everything around your topic, right? But it's always kind of, recombining the existing ideas, but in a new way. And it almost comes automatically when you really study everything that is around a certain topic. Then it's not difficult to really think about, oh, then what is the next step? Yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, I
Thanks
kind of
for
want to add on to that, Chungpei. I think you kind of touched on something important. It's for me, for example, when I am creating stuff with a problem in mind, I find it quite easy actually to be creative and for inspiration to strike. But then when you're creating stuff without like a clear problem or something that's more arbitrary like art, I find it a bit more difficult. And I think your example of you creating that music and it taking so long for inspiration to strike is kind of a good example of that. And like, I find myself very artistically inclined and I want to like make art. And I don't know where to start usually because there's no problem statement or there's no thing that I'm trying to achieve. It's very loose.
Thanks for sharing this, and I think you mentioned something very important here is that I forgot to warn you, somehow in a way that I'm talking about art for my personal work, but when I'm doing my stuff, I mean with Palo and stuff, I don't consider that what I'm doing is art, and I guess that's the same thing for designers and stuff. We have to work under constraint. So, and there are some business and commercial objectives also behind everything that we are doing. So I'm not considering what I do at Palo as a piece of art, but so it's very important to mention it because a lot of designers or art directors working in some advertising companies are like kind of divas, like, yeah, I'm doing art. No, you are not doing art. You know what I mean? You are using art, but you are not doing art, which is very different. But thanks for sharing. So moving on, so the answer to this question, of course, is some researchers from neuroscience have shown that yes, creativity can be taught. And from this article from Hilary Grigonis, she explained that cultivating creativity doesn't have to be done exclusively in childhood. And additional studies suggest that habits like writing down new ideas, trying new things, and regularly learning on unfamiliar subjects can help foster creativity. What this implies is that in the modern context, finding inspiration is exactly the same thing as looking at your favorite thinkers, doers, and even competitors, and understanding what triggers they activate to generate such results. I would say it's more related to analysis and uncovering hidden opportunities rather than observing random things and finding solutions out of the blue. So what it basically means here is that first, creativity can be taught, and second, inspiration as well. And of course, there are plenty of articles and research papers that share the same perspective, but I wanted just to give you one here for this presentation today. So as I said earlier, inspiration is the key to unlocking your creativity. Let's say someone tasks you with finding a solution to a problem. What steps would you take to achieve your goal? Or what if you want to pick up a new hobby tomorrow, which involves creating something from scratch? How would you start? So to do this, so as I said at the beginning of this presentation, there are many ways to create things. And I would like to show you here what's my process and framework I developed to become more creative. And that's really a process that I constrained myself with because it works with my personality. When I created this framework, I was pretty inspired with some design thinking processes you may know. So, yeah. And this framework is actually very pragmatic and empirical. So from what you experienced and learned, you can work through it. But let's try together to see how it works. So the first step is to find an idea, okay? Everyone has idea, right? Imagine just a design brief or just a one-liner saying the sky is blue and the sun is yellow. What comes into your head? What are you picturing? So maybe guys, in like 5 seconds less, can you share quickly what you have in mind if I just say that the sky is blue and the sun is yellow in a few sentences? Let's go. Chunwei, you want to start? You want to share what you have in mind?
What ideas in terms of like visually?
Can be anything, visually or...
I don't know, vacation?
Vacation? Hey,
Yeah.
that's a good start. Okay, what else? Chris, what do you have in mind?
Our life is a piece of art.
Okay, okay, that's good. That's good. That's a good start. Okay, Natasha, what about you? What do you have?
Time
Quickly.
to go outside.
Perfect. Okay. So you see, just in a few sentences, in a few words, what started from a basic abstract liner has now morphed into something a bit more tangible. And this is your idea. And it's basically an ideation step into a design process. And as you generate more and more ideas, you will be able to decide on the best one and to develop it further. You can write down on a paper all your ideas. Maybe you'll have 10, 20 ideas. And at the end of this first step, select just one. And this is the hardest part, is to choose. But keep in mind that the outcome, the result, needs to be understood by your audience. And having multiple ideas into one can be very confusing for people. So think about one example. I don't know if you guys remember this video game console, the Nintendo Wii U. So is it a portable video game? Is it a living room video game? We don't really know why the controller has a screen when you play on your TV. And that's one of the reasons also it was a very big fail for Nintendo at the time. And of course, there are plenty of examples of this where brands didn't really position properly their products. They had multiple ideas and ultimately it was very confusing for people. I don't know if you also remember the Nokia Engage. Do you remember this phone? It was a kind of video game phone which looked like a tacos, you know? So it was also a major fail for Nokia. But let's continue. The second step is the research and inspiration. So when you select your idea, develop it. How? So we said it, inspiration. You need to find some references and some examples of people who have recreated these things. And next, gather what you have and start doodling some sketches or charts or write down some new ideas. You might not be good at writing, drawing, or sketching, but that's perfectly fine. If you have a clear idea in mind, try to sketch it as accurately as possible. And experiment with raw sketches and focus on the key elements that you want to incorporate. The third step is to prototype more accurately. So as soon as you have all your ideas on the paper, you will have a clearer vision of your final result. Now it's time to start drawing more accurately. So this is probably the trickiest and most sensitive part of the process, as it will influence the rest of your design. But the design or the thing you are creating. But take your time here, erase if necessary, draw again, repeat, and finally you should just end up with a final sketch or version that closely resembles your final deliverable. Fourth step, start and iterate. Start designing, whether it's on Photoshop, After Effects, Blender, Microsoft Word, Figma, whatever software you are using, try to recreate what you have doodled. If something doesn't look right, just go back to step 2 and 3. And this step can last a few hours or even a few weeks. When I designed some project, it took me maybe 3 weeks, to complete just this step because I thought of many new ideas while I was perfecting my design. Yeah. And the last step is to polish with details. Make it your own. The beauty is actually in the details, and the slightest motifs can bring a lot of value and satisfaction to your assets. More importantly, it will set it apart from anyone else. And it's only through this kind of details where people can really measure your commitment. But also, of course, it also has to align with the brief, and it has to make sense with the initial problem or demand. So I introduced you my framework and how it works. Now I want to show you how I applied it in my work. So I want to talk about MayaBot. So as part of our Palo IT data transformation initiative, my team and I recently worked on and released an animated video about a simple chatbot, introducing its features and how it worked. So the first step was to find an idea. So we had this idea of just creating a minimalist and AI object which doesn't have a human face. That was our idea. So you see, very, very simple idea. Then the second step was to do our research and inspiration. So we started to focus our inspiration on a few things, but our two main inspirations were from the movie Her, you might have seen, and the minimalist style of Apple's Siri. And although these references served as our direction for the design, we also explored numerous sources to also understand how other brands leveraged the visual identity of AI and chatbots. So we looked at Cortana from Microsoft, Google Assistant, Alexa from Amazon, Siri from Apple. And the main point we highlighted from our research was that all these brands used a circle or a series of dots to illustrate a bot. So of course, using a circle is not, a circle shape is not a random choice. It has an important meaning as it usually represents the protection, for example, the belly of the mother where the baby grows, the perfection, the inclusivity, the circle of relationship, and the infinity as it has no ending. So the third step was to prototype more accurately. So we started to sketch out our storyboard based on what we envisioned for this video animation. Then we prototyped more accurately. We started and iterate. So as this fourth step, I just continue to work on the design more precisely on Illustrator. And as previously mentioned, this step was quite tricky and sensitive as it basically influenced the rest of the process. But that being said, it's a very helpful step which allows you to reuse some of the things you created for the next step. And the last one was to polish with details. So I added some details and refined them along the way by combining these two sources of inspiration. And we basically came up with the following animation you might have seen. So I'm just gonna show you just the beginning, the 10 first seconds, but you can find it on Slack or on YouTube if needed.
Hello, I am Maya. I am your friendly neighborhood chatbot. It's nice to meet you.
Okay, moving on to the next project. That's one of the projects I particularly like. It's a personal project I wanted to showcase. Here. So I wanted to create basically a 3D model of a shop house as a tribute to Singapore's rich history. And similar to some other projects, I wanted to incorporate some surreal elements while also keeping it grounded into reality. So my first idea, my idea was just a Singaporean shop house. So very simple idea, Singaporean shop house. The second step, naturally, I found inspiration in the multicolored shop house along Amoy Street and also some other places in Singapore. Then came the sketching part. I tried to reproduce as accurately as possible some of the important elements I saw. Then the third step was to prototype more accurately, so you can see the drawing. So just a more accurate version of my doodles that I did previously, where I tried to reproduce the windows, the doors, some of the architectural elements that you can see on the shop house. The fourth step was to start and iterate. So I used the Blender, which is a 3D software for creating the shop house. And then the fifth step was to polish with some details, to add some stuff like the plants or the tiles on the floor in front of the shop house. So we can see a better view here. So some of the elements like the plants, as I said, or the jars or the box with the bottles were not planned at first. And I just, added them along the way. So I would like to actually conclude this presentation with only two key takeaways here. The first one is, although my approach and focus is more design-centric, you will find that it can be adapted to any situation. From firstly finding an idea and looking at some references to prototyping and final embellishments, this creative process can be applicable and useful in many other ways. For instance, if you are an app developer looking to create a brand new shopping experience on mobile phone, where would you look for inspiration? Maybe you would look at Shopee or Lazada, or Amazon, or what kind of features would you like to enhance or modify to kind of make it the first of its kind? And these are some of the key questions to think about before you get your hands dirty. But the valuable key takeaway I want to leave you with today is to stay consistent to what others are doing before bringing in your own added value. The second key takeaway is that the creative process I introduced you is in this presentation is a step-by-step process of what you should do when it comes to creating something, from a gathering of research and your own ideas. And we can actually trace the creative journey from start to finish and understand how it all came about. And that's, for me, the most valuable part of a product or solution, the stories behind them. Always remember that creativity is not something that you have or you don't have. It's something you need to work on every day and cultivate. You can find inspiration anywhere. You can look on Instagram, on Behance, on Dribble or GitHub, or in the street by observing people or in the environment around you. It can come even from a conversation with your friends or colleagues. Don't forget just to ask yourself questions, a lot of questions. Everything can be inspiring and thought-provoking, and creative ideas will emerge when you start questioning and wondering why things are this way. I don't like to use this expression because I think it's a bit too mainstream and it doesn't mean anything anymore nowadays. But try to challenge the status quo. Try to think outside the box. Again, I don't like these expressions because when you are too much outside the box, you are not in the box anymore, and people don't understand what you are doing. And creativity or products or whatever you are creating needs to be understood. And the last key takeaway I want to give you, a kind of bonus, is from this presentation, is to challenge yourself before challenging others, and then do better. Don't try to do something good, do something which is better. And I will conclude this presentation with this quote from Vincent van Gogh, who said that if you hear a voice within you said, "I cannot paint," then by all means paint, and that voice will silence. So which basically means just do it, just go for your ideas and just create something, some stuff. Thank you.